Joe, how are you?
Very well. Munster, Leinster, Saturday, 7:35. So what's your mindset now? Get these Dublin Jackeens down to Limerick and let's give them a good kicking and send them home. Is that the mood at the moment?
That's a sort of default setting most times, isn't it? I think there would have been an element, strange, a mixture of frustration and relief that some of the matches haven't gone ahead because the injury toll is ever increasing. I think everywhere. It's amazing when you try and concertina one season into the start of this season, play as many games as you can, have a couple of additional international type competitions in the middle of it. You suddenly see that we can stretch our resources very thin very quickly, and I think you'll find a lot of people will be happy that one of the weeks was called off. And I also think they'll be happy to have the opportunity to play against their consistent and historical rivals. So I think they'd be looking at the opportunity. They would have liked to have said, God, if we'd played them a few weeks ago when we were absolutely in our pomp, would it be easier or not? I don't know. I think they'd relish it because it is a bit of a throwback to things that we would have had 20 and 30 years ago, being almost an Irish trial, and that's no disrespect to Connacht or Ulster, but it's this, the bulk of the players will come from these teams, and it's the closest thing to a trial that we'll have. So I think a lot of players will try and put their hand up and say, I deserve selection. I want to put Andy Farrell to the pin of his collar to understand that he wants to pick players that are performing immediately and foreign players. So for that's what they'd want to do. But for Munster, they want to get a win. They've always wanted to get a win over Leinster, and they've had a good start to the season, and they want to finish it off if they can.
Yeah, that trial aspect is one of the reasons I think people are really looking forward to this. If this match had happened in December amidst the festive bustle, it would have been fine, but there would have been slightly weakened sides. It's a busy time of the year, and we'd have long forgotten it by now, whereas suddenly Six Nations coming, your best 15 give or take against our best 15 give or take, and Andy Farrell watching. There's no real way this can't have lots of bite in it and be a brilliant game, I would suspect.
I think all of those things, and whether the teams nullify each other out, or whether, like, there's no point holding anything back. This is all out to try and get your green jersey, and it isn't as if it will come entirely just down to these two teams, but still they'll be looking to make certain they can do that. But also it's to try and keep that sense of momentum. We hear conversations of momentum all the time, and it's one of those words that's incredibly irritating, because when the wind is at your back, you seem to be able to do nothing wrong and things are great. And if you have a couple of losses, you can almost go into free fall. And but one good performance can change that. But Leinster need to get the wins under their belt for them to be in the playoff at the end of this season. Munster would like to absolutely nail it down perfectly, everything done. They don't have a huge amount more points that they have to get, but everything they can get to make certain they're in the right place, that's kind of part and parcel for professional rugby players. They want to be in the competition in the knockout stages at the end. But the extra bite for this is we've got used to, and even though we've apologised to the Christmas games for the lack of frontline players playing and the sense of occasion that was there, and there are reasons for that, and we do pander to it, I think, a little, and I do definitely. Partly because you want players to be rested, and you can't have the best team out every week. Rugby is not that game. It just cannot be that game. And there's a whole variety of other conversations to have with what rugby is trying to do and the extra competitions they're trying to put in that I disagree with. But I do relish the idea of seeing two fully loaded teams playing against each other. I think it's great. It's great for rugby. It's great at this moment in time, because even though we've only had one weekend off of rugby, I think we all missed it. You know, and we were bemoaning the fact that some of it wasn't great because there weren't fans in, but I missed not watching it all the same.
So Johan van Graan has 1 win and 8 against Leinster. That's his record going into this game. Beaten by them in 3 consecutive Pro 14 semi-finals, not least the most recent one. And that's been discussed a little bit this week. So if you remember, this was a game where I think Munster fans in the main were a bit disappointed because there were a succession of box kicks as their shiny new Damien Dialande stood there and didn't get much of the ball. Now, interestingly, to Munster's 36 kicks that day, Leinster had 33. Leo Cullen afterwards, you might remember, said it was a brutal game. Felipe Contepomi said Leinster were trying not to get drawn into a box kick fest. This week, Johan van Graan responded saying, I saw against Ulster 2 weeks ago, Leinster used some of our tactics. So, you know, that's brilliant to see with a smirk on his face. So that's kind of brewing here. The question being, I presume we're going to see more from Munster, even in slightly dodgy weather conditions, which seem to be on the way. I presume we're going to see more from Munster in attack this time around because that box kick plan does not work.
Parts of it work. I have long since given up listening to what the coaches say about each other and the teams because it's kind of barb and counter barb and is a bit boring. And so I would take everything they say and just ignore it. I don't know if that's things that get put up on the wall anymore. I don't think so. Munster's performance in that semi-final, I still look back at it as it was a plan. It was a plan to try and be in the game with 10 minutes to go and sneak a try to win. It was very close to working. It was horrendous. Right, so there's no way around that fact. It was not. It was close to actually working, and it would have been a travesty, I think, if it had worked. So, and Munster didn't fire a shot that day, so they kicked a lot of ball, and they were missing players, and they hadn't a huge amount done, but they decided that was the plan, and that's just not why you want to watch the game. That's not why you want to play the game. There has to be more than that. So I fully expect to see box kicks at the weekend. Box kicks are part of the game, and actually the part of the game that Munster can do very, very well, and I would expect them to do it well. And for me, I think we're seeing Conor Murray coming back in pretty good form too. So I think that will make a bit of a difference. But I'd equally say that the team has grown an awful lot since that period of time, and there's been a concerted effort on behalf of the coaches to show a little bit more, and at times that doesn't come out because these things take a bit of time, and yet Munster seem to be looking to do more with the ball and to expose weaknesses in defence. Now I still say Leinster are the best team in the Pro 14, and you can't try as many things, but I think Munster will try more than they have done. Okay. And they have to try a lot more than they did in that semi-final. Yeah.
One thought, I mean, let's preview some aspects of this game. Munster at the sports ground, one of the abiding memories is Tadhg Byrne just going to town on Connacht on the ground. So that's going to be a fair old fight there.
It is. I think Munster have been excellent on dealing with. It's a grey area, and nobody likes those grey areas, and it depends on the particular referee. And they seem to get it right with the referee that will allow that second to get on the ball, or not the second to clear it out. You know, there's kind of pull and drag, and I think Munster have been incredible for attacking rucks that have been lost. And I'm not a huge favour of them when they're absolutely lost. So it comes down to decision making at that period of time. For Tadhg Byrne, he just seems to have the eye for the ball where it is. He gets into a very good position for a tall man. He's impossible to move off, and if it's ref properly, unless they have a second guy cleaning out immediately, you can see a lot of balls being turned over. I would like to see a little bit more space. I think that in the last few weeks there's been that creeping of the defensive line has been creeping up past the hindmost foot, which Leinster are particularly good at, and Munster are good at too. So I'd rather if neither of them were doing that, because you'd like to see a little bit more space for people to run onto the ball.
Loads, I mean, we talked about this being a trial game in some way and auditions happening. There are loads of interesting cases in the back three. Hugo Keenan's going to want to do his level best to get a green shirt. Andrew Conway, I'm sure, wants to remind people the form he has shown in a green jersey of late. Dave Kearney, probably wants people to say, what else do I have to do? Keith Earls wants to make damn sure he's still in that jersey as well. James Lowe's injured, so he'll be looking on. And I'm probably forgetting somebody as well. And I'm sure Jacob Stockdale will be watching from afar as well. And Jordan Larmour probably wants to says, why was I not on the tip of your tongue? So this is really interesting territory to watch. It's really interesting because what I've liked, and you know, we criticise coaches for what they do, and it's part of our job is to double guess what they're trying to do. And I wasn't convinced with Stockdale at 15. I'm still not. But he is the most try-scoringest player that we have in the last number of years. So you want to see him score tries. So you want to see him get on the field when you can. For me, Keenan is nowhere near the finished article, and yet he gives a sense of comfort. So I like him. I watched him play the week before last. He just looks. Actually, he made a couple of improvements where he'd been weak in the internationals. Was he would catch the ball. He looked very assured under the ball. He'd miss a couple of balls too. That's part of the game. But he didn't get isolated afterwards. So when he carried the ball into contact, the ball was won again. And that's where he'd made mistakes in the autumn internationals, and he didn't make them in the last couple of games, which shows that he is learning very, very quickly. Yes. And for me, he looks like the fullback. He's an unusual shape. He's quite slight. He's not the biggest guy. He's not the tallest guy. But he seems to kind of go about his business quite well. I think I'd feel safe with him at 15. His positioning has been very good. So if he gets a good run at the weekend, I think you can get to see that. Shane Daly, I think, had been doing very well, and then when he got his chance, it was on the wing. And but for me, again, he's a full back. I would always pick Keith Earls, and I don't know how many more years we have of him, but I know we'll miss him when we don't have him. Yeah, and I just think he offers a level of additional aggression or whatever it is, and he's got pure gas. The only thing I would like more of our wingers is they get involved in the game more. Our particular style has yet to bring them back in, and when you make a comparison to we'll say Noel in England, or they have a variety, they just crop up all over the place. I guess James Lowe has tried to do that a bit, hasn't he? Yeah, he does try and do it a bit, and but again, when guys have been injured, so you talk about Andrew Conway, we know what he can do. I would have said he was absolutely brilliant last year, off his form just a little bit this year, gets injured. I'd like to see him get back. So was he carrying that for a period of time? Can he get back? Can he get his confidence back? Because he was a serious threat last year. No ringrose we're hearing, so Deolande, and who I know you've been very impressed with, and Chris Farrell might like the look of that. If you were to boil down an issue for Munster, the consensus would be, I don't know to what extent you agree, is that Leinster's front five are better than pretty much everyone in the league, including Munster. So if you do agree with that, is there any style of game or ploy or tactic, if you're on the lesser of the front five situation, to nullify that disadvantage to some extent or other? Is there areas of the game you can try and avoid? No, and I wouldn't even go into it thinking that Leinster are better either. I think Munster's discipline at times lets them down. I do think that Munster can put a very good tight five on the field. And if I had all 8 in the pack concentrating on every scrum, which is what I would want, if you were supposedly the underdogs, and I think you would be the underdogs in this instance, you just, lads, you're fighting your corner, you have to look after your front row. You can't let them get exposed in this. I think they would do very well. Again, it comes down to a lot of concentration. All you need is one lack of concentration, and that whole thing can just can go downhill quite quickly. I would say the same with the lineouts, because for the 5 metre mauls that happen so often, lack of concentration in that period of time. And also I'd be looking at targeting the Leinster lineout. I wouldn't be waiting on the ground
for them 5 metres from it. I think you have to take the view that you can put some of the Leinster throwers under pressure. So a lot of this comes down to selection, because it depends on who they're putting into the second row. But no, I wouldn't be taking a backward step at all, and I wouldn't be shy in terms of saying, actually, if this is what people are saying, I think we need to make certain that that isn't the case.
And you don't agree? You wouldn't have Leinster's front five on a different level to Munster's?
Do you know what? I think they've played better. I think they've been consistent. I think they're a much better pack when you've Tyke Furlong and Porter coming on afterwards. I don't think you get any respite. I don't think. I think Leinster's pack has been good, very good, actually. And look, this is not diminishing them. For me, I think it comes down to that level of concentration. If it isn't the be-all and end-all, and if you can't do it all the time, that's fine. But you need to do it in this game for Munster. So I just wouldn't take that as being something that has to be there. And a lot of that thing can change in a week.
Yes.
Get your concentration so right, or in 2 weeks, and you just say, okay, we got that wrong because the tight head second row just didn't get his bind right, or he'd no flanker on him for 2 seconds because he put his head up to have a look to see what was going on. That's unacceptable. So I think it'll be tough for Munster's pack, but I would relish that. That's the sort of thing that you'd say, okay, they're saying they're much better, and there's a huge difference.
Yeah.
It isn't a huge difference when you come down to 8 against 8.
And maybe Friday night, Living with Lions 97, watch a bit of Jim Telfer, and that can do no harm as well. No
harm whatsoever. You'll have a little bit of white specks all over the place. He'd be creaming at the mouth, shouting at you. But I know that's been on again at the weekend or the last couple of weeks. I've had texts with it, but I haven't watched it again. I watched it the first lockdown. I'm not going to watch it constantly. So just something to put to you from Andy Dunn the other evening. It was kind of an interesting chat. There wasn't much rugby, obviously, from the weekend just gone to analyse, and I was asking Andy in advance, is there anything you want to talk about? And he was talking about the attitude to the Irish number 9 jersey, and he was, looking at other countries, and the French obviously jumped to mind, but the prominence they give the number 9, and we've obviously been very reliant on 10s, and he acknowledged when you've personalities like Sexton and O'Gara back-to-back in this professional era, that's understandable. But I might just play you a clip and you can get a sense of what he was saying about what he'd like from an Irish number 9. It was generally to do with tempo, and let's increase the tempo of Irish play. So here he is, and interestingly, Keith, he cited Owen Redden here as somebody who took that bit of responsibility on the pitch as a number 9 and took some of the weight off the number 10. Have a listen.
Where I found Redden had leadership influence in terms of key decisions. Redden would have worked closely when he was Irish scrum half with O'Connell. For example, Redden may well and regularly did change line-out calls, influence how he was going to receive the ball, therefore how the back line were going to receive the ball, as opposed to being passive and accepting what Paul O'Connell gave him. And it's that level of involvement in the overall strategy and outcomes on the field that I think I'd like to see a shift towards, which is not to diminish the responsibilities on the likes of Sexton or whoever plays at 10, but it's to share that responsibility and take ownership that not one person, and not particularly our 10, becomes responsible for the overall tempo. And certainly our 9s have been responsible for slowing everything down as opposed to speeding things up. So yeah, I think Owen Redden of all the scrum halves in the last 20 years were probably the closest to that Welsh-French prototype that I'm referring to.
Slowing everything down rather than speeding things up. That was a regular theme he came back to across the chat. What are your thoughts on our attitude, our Irish attitude to the number 9 jersey?
Yeah, I didn't hear that interview before, and I didn't hear that one, but I had a chat with one of the producers beforehand, and there was an awful lot more involved in that. Slowing down, anyway, firstly, slowing down the ball, I hate. So if we put that down as a simple thing, the idea that you want to slow things down, I don't mind that you slow it down every now and then. And
are we guilty of doing that a bit too much?
Oh no, we absolutely, and we have been for a few years actually.
Okay.
And so the idea that let's stop and slow, and then we start with this kind of caterpillar thing where you'd have all the guys back before you box kick. That's rubbish and shouldn't be in the game. And actually, if you slow things down, in my view, the referee should say use it or lose it, and that's beginning to happen now anyway, and that's a good thing. So I think the idea of slowing it down is not great. I know the laws have changed, so that you want to be in a better position with better players in the right places on the field before you move the ball, which for me almost sounds counterintuitive to a fast moving game, but it's because it's easy for someone, and we just talked about tight burn. You can get isolated very quickly and somebody can just win that ball. That wouldn't have happened before. If you were able to clear out with your feet, he would never be in that position. The laws have changed. The laws have, there's a different view on it, and you react to it accordingly. Ireland under Joe Schmidt, and to be honest, Munster under Van Gran, which is obviously South African influence, is that you do tend to kick the ball away a lot and have a really good strong defence and then deal with it afterwards, and sometimes you want to slow that down. And if some of the players that you have are not up to scratch, you're better off to slow it down sometimes. But we got into the idea that actually, unless everything was 100% perfect, we slowed it down.
Right.
And so for me, no, that's not it. The add-on to the conversation being about a Petit General at 9, guys who have leadership will lead. So he mentioned Owen Redden. Owen Redden, for me, was one of the smartest guys that played the game. He got some caps and didn't get more caps because his style of play was not maybe fully appropriate or fast enough or slick enough in the certain parts. But he was a thinking 9, without a shadow of a doubt.
He mentioned Cooney too, funny enough, as like the current exemplar of what he would like, that all-action style.
Yeah, there's a big difference to a thinking 9 and an all-action 9. That's quite different, and so I wouldn't have put those in the same bracket. Right. Again, I think Cooney played really, really well in the end of 18-19 and didn't get a chance for a variety of reasons. I thought he should have got a chance. I thought he should have been on the bench. He should have been coming off the bench till we get to see him. I actually think Conor Murray has got better from where he was at. He's playing better, and I don't know that Cooney is playing as well as he was. Yeah. And that's unlucky, actually. But I don't know that you change the philosophy of the team because you have a player. Like, the player has to be a guaranteed starter for that to be the case. And if I give a simple example, when Brian O'Driscoll came on the scene, we wanted to get the ball into Brian's hands. Our philosophy, our style changed almost entirely because we wanted to get it into his hands because he could turn the opposition. You wanted to get it into Dennis Hickey's hands. Prior to, like, Dennis started in the mid-90s, he rarely got the ball because, there's no point getting the ball if you're static, but if you get it when there's a half a break inside you, he'd the gas to do anything with it. And because of that, nearly all the tries were scored in the backs because we changed fairly quickly. But we didn't go to the idea where a 9 runs the play. That isn't something that fits into Irish rugby because it just hasn't. It fits into French rugby because it's always been the case, but there's also always been huge depth to the way the French backs play. We don't play in that style. That's a philosophy. Right. That is so.
And is that quite the change if we were to say, that sounded nice on Monday with Andy, let's go down that route? That's not easy.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't go down that route, and I think it's a lovely conceptual conversation. But you would need a lot of players to be able to change how they've played for years to go and do it. So even if you look at Pat Lam in Connacht and the impact he had on Connacht, which was let's move the ball. The ball is always live. You trust your hands. Doesn't matter about the weather. You'll be backed by the coach if you have a cut and the ball is always in movement. That is just a really, really fast way of playing the way Irish players play with a higher skill level. If you're talking about the 9 to control everything, the 9s that I would know from France, like Galtier, he'd pick up the ball, he could jog back 2 or 3 yards because he knew he'd all the time in the world, because the French players were miles back. They'd have almost 2 layers of backs 10 yards behind the gain line. And they all knew intuitively that all you do is wait for one guy to have a run and you can react to it afterwards. To try and change that would be very, very difficult. But I would rather we actually played that much faster game, and I think we could move Ireland to doing that, to that blend of forwards and backs running at a huge amount of pace. I think that's something that's really interesting to watch. I think it's, I kind of think it's where, can't say it for certain, but where Andy Farrell wants to go to, where actually if you have the ball in space and you can see a space, you're going for the space. You're not slowing it down because you have a set call that's been called.
Okay. Interesting. Might chat about that again at some stage over the next couple of months. And to be fair to Andy, I mean, he wasn't saying 9 should do everything by any means, just a bit more, you know, a lot of reliance on Sexton.
Yeah, I'm a fan for that anyway.
Yeah,
and
I know you are.
I used to love playing with Peter Stringer, because Stringer, you just tell Stringer pass the ball, he'd pass the ball, he'd take your teeth out passing the ball.
Yeah.
And but we used to have a conversation. Do me a favour, Pete. I think you should have a run. Have a go yourself. One each half.
Yeah.
And even though your passing is perfect, it just keeps everybody honest, keeps the defenders honest, gives us a little bit more space.
It's funny, as you're saying that, I did a career chat with Owen Redden last year, and he said it was only when he got to Wasps that he was sat down and strictly told, if you come off after 80 minutes and you haven't had a few runs, then you're not doing your job, you know, and that he really took that to heart. Clock's coming against me. When we throw everything into this melting pot for Saturday then, and there are you know, a whole bunch of factors, and Munster at home, and Leinster's form is where it is over the last couple of weeks. The short version, I would put it to you, is still 1 win in 8. Leinster are still just the better team. Leinster will do enough to win this game.
I think Leinster are the better squad. I think Munster have improved hugely over the last period of time. They're not anywhere near the finished article. They need to be an awful lot better. I would watch out for Damien Dialende and see, does he hit 5th gear? And if he hits 5th gear and the players react around him, I think Munster can get their win.
Okay, very good. I'm looking forward to it, I must say. I should mention Connacht play Ospreys on Sunday, and the new us, this was the theme of Andy Friend's press conference, where we're not just showing up for Interpros. So we will watch this that space. And just to mention as well, this is going to be a thing. We are going to be talking about other coaching tickets over the next couple of weeks. So England, their forwards coach, and we wish him well, Matt Proudfoot, has tested positive for COVID, which means Eddie Jones has to self-isolate for 10 days. Simon Amor, the attack coach, has to self-isolate for 10 days. Jason Riles, their skill coach, is staying in Oz. So it's over to you, John Mitchell. Now, thankfully, the way it's fallen, it'll just be for 1 day. But, you know, the way the coaching ticket are all together all the time, in the box all the time, if one of them is positive, they're all out for, by the looks of things, 10 days at least. So this is a little taster of the difficulty ahead of the Six Nations.
It is, and I know Mitch really well. He was my first ever number 8. And he coached with Ireland for a period of time. He's fantastically mad, and if he gets his hands on the team for a period of time, it could be very tough. But and he's a great guy. Yeah. But like, that just shows you the difficulties. We discussed it last week. Some of the teams aren't able to spend any time together because of self-isolating, and that's right too.
Finn Russell's back in the Scotland squad as well, which is good.
It is good. You want to see different players on the field, and my God, is he different. So he has the chance to be one of the best Mavericks of all time, because he does a lot of really, really great things, but you'd still like to be in his ear and annoying him for 80 minutes to see what you could make him do as well. So it's interesting.
Very good. So that was Keith Wood. And by the way, with like deft of hand, I still don't actually know who you've told me is going to win on Saturday. You've done that beautifully.
I did it really well. It's my job, isn't it?
Who is going to win? Leinster?
No, I said Munster are going to win.
Did you? Munster are going to win?
Well, I think you asked me a question. I said there's some things that are required. I think Munster are getting better. I think if Dialende has the best game that he has, I think he's raising the performance of the players around him. If he's phenomenal, I think Munster win.
Okay.
So
okay.
that's what I said. You have to listen to it for
well,
it to
if we're throwing in ifs and buts, well then, Jesus, I mean.
I am a good man for a caveat.
Oh my God. Right, we'll talk Monday or next Wednesday. Thanks, Keith.
Brilliant. Cheers, Joe.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.